Welcome back, survivor. If you can hear this, it means you're still alive. This is Jack's Nightmares, and this is your next story. I woke before my alarm in a dark hotel room near Narita, eyes open to the ceiling, already running through the day's sequence. I checked the phone for crew messages. The company app showed a green check on my report time, the aircraft tail, and the gate. There was a fresh bulletin about illness clusters in East Asia and Europe, a reminder to stock extra masks in the galley, and a short note from a chief pilot telling crews to keep announcements calm and simple. Nothing in that list changed my job. I still had to show up, brief, and fly the route we were assigned. I sat up, stretched my back until it popped, and swung my feet into cold air. In the lobby, a small television near the breakfast area ran a local news feed with captions. A map with red circles near Seoul, Milan, and a port city in China stayed on the screen, while the anchor read a prepared line about monitoring the situation. A few guests watched while eating quietly. A father adjusted his son's mask and wiped his hands with sanitizer. I poured coffee, forced down a bowl of rice and eggs, and checked the weather again. The Pacific looked cooperative. Stable jet stream, a crosswind near the Aleutians, some chop over a cold layer. Nothing we had not seen 100 times. The crew van was on time. 2 flight attendants climbed in with me. Hana, our purser, gave me a nod that said good morning, and also said she had slept badly. Another attendant, Akiko, scrolled through messages from her sister about a hospital crowd in Osaka. No one wanted to talk about it out loud. The driver held the lane steady on the highway while a line of trucks loaded with perishables passed on the left. The sky was clear. The airport came into view in a flat line of glass and metal and moving lights. Crew security was predictable and quiet, which I appreciated. Badge scan, bag through the belt, random swab, a quick look down the line from a guard who knew us as regulars. A supervisor handed Hana a cardboard box with extra masks and small sanitizer bottles for the carts. I adjusted my tie, signed the log at the counter, and took the elevator to operations. The dispatch room felt the same as every other day. Grey carpet, whiteboards with flight numbers and tail assignments, coffee that tasted burned unless you added a packet of sugar. I gave my name to the dispatcher on duty and he handed me the packet for Flight 281 to San Francisco. The printed pages were warm. Route, altitude plan, step climbs, fuel numbers, ETOPS alternates, equal time points, drift down profiles, and the notes for the day. I checked the weights. 0 fuel weight, planned takeoff weight, fuel on board. The numbers lined up with what I expected for a full cabin and a heavy cargo load. The NOTAMs took a minute. Runway lights under maintenance at a small Alaskan field we would not use today. A closure at an old Russian alternate that was off our list anyway. Anchorage reported all services available. San Francisco had a lane closure on an outer taxiway. Oceanic frequencies and HF reminders sat in the middle of the packet where they always sit. The weather sheets matched the app. Stable winds, light turbulence near a cold air mass, crosswind around the chain. At the back of the packet there was a short type note from company dispatch. More illness reported in several hubs. Cabin crews reminded to stock masks and wipes. Pilots reminded to make clear announcements if passengers seemed anxious. The note did not order any special action beyond basic hygiene and good communication. I read it twice anyway. The numbers were trending up and that stayed in my head while I folded the packet and slid it into the side pouch of my bag. I opened the crew app and checked our aircraft's logbook status. No open mechanical deferrals except a minor lavatory light in the mid-cabin. All airworthiness items were current. Oxygen bottle pressures were in the green as of the last flight. The tires had been changed 2 days prior. I made a note to take an extra look at a small panel near the right main gear that had been resealed last month. Nothing urgent, just habit. Hana joined me at the operations table with her own packet and asked if I had seen the news about Europe. I said I had. She said the crew group chat was full of messages from friends in Frankfurt about passengers coughing and asking to change seats. She shrugged and said, "We will handle it," the way experienced cabin crew always say when the subject is something they cannot control. I believed her. I had watched her lead tense cabins before and bring them down to a calm baseline. I sent a quick message to my mother in Minnesota to say I was crossing the ocean today and would call from San Francisco after the turn. I kept it short because if you leave too much room in a message before a long flight, people read meanings you did not intend. She responded with a heart and a wish for smooth skies. I took the internal elevator up to the gate. The hallway smelled faintly of coffee, jet fuel, and carpet cleaner. The gate area was already filling. A tour group in matching windbreakers argued cheerfully about snacks. A baby slept face down on her mother's shoulder in a bright yellow hat. Several passengers wore masks. A man in a business suit typed with 2 thumbs and did not look up as his boarding zone numbers changed on the screen. Captain Sato was at the podium reviewing the latest passenger count with the gate agent. He had his jacket off and his sleeves rolled. A pen sat behind his ear, a habit he had never dropped from his early years. He looked up, saw me, and smiled. "Morning," he said in a low voice. "Good crossing day." "Works for me," I said. "I prefer flights that do not make the news." He laughed under his breath and handed me the latest seat map. "Packed," he said. "We are tight on overhead space. Cargo full. We have a family traveling on medical visas in row 25 who asked to sit near a lavatory. Approved. Air Marshal added late. Seat assignment unknown." I initialed the manifest where the gate agent pointed and acknowledged the marshal note. We do not ask names. We do not ask where the person sits. We just sign and keep the information in the back of our heads. We walked down the jet bridge together. The smell shifted from terminal to airplane. Conditioned air, plastic, the faint scent of coffee from the galley. The forward flight attendant, Luis, greeted us with a practiced smile and the tone that tells you he has done this 1,000 times and will do it 1,000 more. "Galley secured," he said. "Catering complete. We stocked extra wipes in all carts." "Thank you," Sato said. "We will brief in 10. I set my bag behind the right seat, adjusted the rudder pedals forward, and pulled my chair in. I like the seat a notch closer than some. It brings the panel into a comfortable reach and keeps my feet flat on the floorboard. I pulled the checklists, put the laminated airport diagram and a clean pen on the side ledge, and checked that the quick reference handbook sat where my right hand expects it. Before touching anything else, I walked the cabin forward to aft to take a read on the room. Hana and Akiko were loading extra pillows and checking that the medkits were sealed. In premium, a man spoke softly to his daughter about her first long flight. In economy, a college-aged pair in hoodies debated whether to swap aisle and window. A woman near the back had a cough that sounded dry and persistent. She wore a mask and held a bottle of water. The air felt normal for a full cabin, warm near the ceiling, cooler along the floor. Nothing set off alarms in my head. Outside, the sun sat over the apron and painted the tails of a row of long-haul twins. Cargo loaders moved containers into our hold with smooth habits. A tug idled near the nose gear. 2 ramp workers checked the baggage door latches and gave each other small hand signals. An engineer stood under the wing reading a screen wired to a ground panel. I waved. He gave me a thumb and pointed to the open maintenance log on his tablet. No open items. I stepped off the jet bridge and down the metal stairs to the ramp for the walkaround. I carry a small flashlight even on bright days because shadows hide details under the fuselage. I started at the nose. That is where my brain expects the check to begin. Nose gear, strut extension within range, no fluid on the chrome, torque link secure, tires with even wear and no cords showing, doors tight, uplock hooks clean, steering actuators dry, safety pins removed and flagged. The chalk marks from the last inspection still traced a neat line across the tire sidewall. I ran 2 fingers across a bolt head and felt clean edges. No metal dust. Lower fuselage, panels seated and secured. No fresh streaks, drain masts clean. I checked the static ports and pitot probes on the left side. Covers removed. No tape, no insect nests, no scratches. I always look twice at sensors. If a small thing fails there, a big thing fails later. Left engine inlet. Fan blades intact, no nicks, no dents, no unexpected stains. Inlet lip smooth. I braced my hand on the cowl ring and checked for movement. Solid. Fan spun with a soft push, stopped with a slight tremble that felt normal. Cowl latches closed. Thrust reverser doors flush. No pooled fuel or oil under the nacelle. Left wing. Slats flush. Tracks clean. Hinges tagged. Upper surface unmarked except for a small scuff near the outboard static wick replacement from last week. Static wicks present. Fuel cap secured. Vent port clear. I looked down the leading edge for any hail marks and saw nothing. I bent to check a small panel near the wing root where sealant had been replaced. The line was smooth and unbroken. Main gear left. Strut extension good. Truck level. Brake lines free of leaks. Tires free of cuts. Brake wear indicators within range. Wheel well doors without fresh rub marks. I looked at the brake assemblies and mentally logged the amount of dust on the calipers. It told me the last cycles were normal. Aft fuselage. Antennae present. Seams clean. Pressure bulkhead area with no visible issues. I paused at the APU exhaust to glance at the soot pattern. Normal. No streaks that would suggest a fuel control issue. Tail. Horizontal stabilizer surfaces clear. Elevator linkages without play. Vertical fin steady. Rudder hinges tight. No ice. The morning air was dry and crisp. Right side. I repeated the checks on the other wing and engine. Right main gear, matched left in condition. Right engine cowl latches were all in the locked position. No gaps along the thrust reverser. I scanned the underside again for any fresh drips. The ramp under us was clean except for a water puddle near a cart that had nothing to do with our airplane. Cargo doors. Latches down. Indicators green. Seals not pinched. I made eye contact with the loadmaster and he showed me his list on a clipboard. The count was full and balanced. Heavy in forward hold. Balanced aft. No dangerous goods listed beyond small lithium batteries in personal devices. I signed his sheet and thanked him. I paused at the nose wheel again and ran my hand over the chalk marks out of habit. Clean. My routine ended where it began. The walk-around had no surprises. The ramp crew moved with steady purpose. The airplane sat ready. Back in the jet bridge, a security supervisor met me with a short form to acknowledge a random cockpit search completed 30 minutes prior. He had a neutral expression and a careful tone. I initialed the form and asked if anything unusual had come up in the terminal. He said passenger volumes were high because flights had been consolidated after a few cancellations in Southeast Asia. He said the medical desk was answering more calls than usual about fevers and headaches. He said boarding would take longer. None of that shocked me. In the cockpit, I sat down and made the space mine. Harness adjusted. Rudder pedals checked again. Seat forward 1 notch. I set my headset on the yoke horn and powered up the displays. The screens came alive in exact, expected order. Upper engine display. Lower system synoptic. Navigation display warm. Primary flight display crisp. I entered the route into the flight management system, checked the waypoints against the printed flight plan, and verified the oceanic crossing coordinates. The alternate fields made sense with today's winds. Equal time points aligned with fuel plan. Sato came in and slid into his seat with the easy motion of a man who had spent half his life here. He reviewed the same items. We cross-checked each other's entries out loud, a steady rhythm of read, and confirmed that cleanse errors before they form habits. We briefed the departure, standard instrument departure off the north runway, step climb schedule, engine out options, return to field plan in the first minutes if needed, and diversion choices beyond that. We talked through the crossing, position reports if required, CPDLC available, HF as backup. We set the speeds and confirmed the performance numbers again. Hana joined us for the crew briefing. Her voice was crisp and clear. She assigned doors and responsibilities, named the crew member who would take charge if she became unavailable, reminded everyone of the location of medkits and the extra wipes, and asked us to support a short pre-departure announcement that acknowledged passenger concerns without feeding them. Sato agreed. I added a note about a possible crosswind on arrival and a request to keep carts stowed early during descent if conditions were choppy. The gate agent checked in again, and said we were oversold by 3 seats, but had volunteers who accepted vouchers to move to a later departure. He looked relieved. No one likes chaos at the door. He handed over the final paperwork with a sigh that sounded like the end of a sprint. The purser's interphone call came right on time. "Cabin secure for boarding," he said. "We will start as soon as you are ready." "Go ahead," Sato said. "Let us keep it smooth." Passengers began to stream on board. A woman stopped at the cockpit door and asked if we were going to avoid the areas with illness. Sato answered gently. He explained that we follow routes designed for safety and weather, that medical teams at the destination would be ready if anyone needed help, and that our crew was trained for medical events. She nodded and took her seat. Boarding filled the cabin in layers. Families took longer with bags and snacks. Solo travelers moved in quick lines. A man in a grey jacket stood for too long in the aisle, watching cabin screens show a silent news scroll about disruptions at a European airport. Hannah moved to him and asked if she could help. He said no and sat. I watched her give him a bottle of water anyway. I made my pre-departure announcement in a plain tone. I introduced us by name. I said the flight time would be just under 10 hours depending on winds. I told passengers we expected a smooth climb and that the seatbelt sign would come off when safe. I acknowledged that many of them had heard news about illness and that our crew would answer any concerns. I kept it short. Too many words add heat to a room that needs calm. The checklist flow felt clean in my hands. Batteries on, external power as needed, fuel pumps armed, IRS aligned. I double-checked the departure runway selection, compared the SID waypoint names with our inserted route, and verified the altitude restrictions. No mismatches. No last-minute runway change. While Sato dealt with a paperwork question from the gate about an unaccompanied minor in row 17, I looked at the captain's side panel where he always keeps a small family photo tucked under a plastic lip. His wife had taken it in a park near their home. He said it brings him back to normal when a day starts strange. I did not have a photo in my space yet. I had my father's old pen clipped to the side pocket and a note taped near the fuel page with a list of anchors I read before every ocean crossing. Fuel, weather, alternates, oxygen, drift down, comms. The pen and the list were enough for now. The forward attendant closed the door and signaled ready to push. The agent waved through the window and stepped back. The jet bridge pulled away with the slow, careful movement of a thing on wheels that holds people. I glanced at the clock and logged the door close time. It matched our schedule to the minute. That is a small but real win in our world. Ground crew marshaled the tug in. I watched the mirror to confirm chocks removed and pins clear. I looked down the aisle one last time. A baby had started to fuss. The mother rocked in a small, steady motion. A man in a row near the back wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand, even though the cabin was cool. He took a sip of water and leaned his head back. I registered the image and filed it under maybe nothing. I reached forward and touched the printed flight plan through the pocket, the way some people tap a doorframe for luck. Routine holds you steady at the start. Then you fly the airplane in front of you. Taxi was long. I watched the wingtip clearance around a slow tug and felt the weight of the cabin behind me. A full load of strangers and stories I would never hear. At the hold short line, Sato looked at me. "Your takeoff," he said. I said, "My takeoff." He called tower and got cleared. I rolled us out onto the runway centerline, held the brakes, brought the thrust up. The engine settled into a low growl that pushed into my chest through the seat. Set takeoff thrust. The numbers matched. We released the brakes and the lights began to streak wider out the windows. 80 knots. V1. Rotate. The nose came up, the ground slid away, and the weight shifted where weight always shifts when the world trades concrete for air. Positive rate. Gear up. We climbed into a soft layer and broke out into clean air. The city shrank behind us, coast curling away under a faint haze. I called for flaps up on schedule, set climb power, and tracked the departure, on centerline, on profile, on plan. Sato called departure and got handed off. We both listened to the frequency where voices sounded bored in a way that meant safety. The cabin call light pinged. The purser told us a few passengers felt unwell and asked for extra water. Nothing unusual on long flights. We acknowledged. I kept climbing. We leveled at 35,000 feet, set cruise power, checked fuel against plan, and leaned back a fraction. Autopilot on. The airplane held steady and sure. I poured coffee from the thermos I keep because the galley stuff is never the same twice. Sato pulled out a small bento his wife made and ate with slow, neat movements. He looked out at the pale line of cloud and said he was tired of reading about sickness and wanted to read about mountains. I said I would take mountains too. The first ripple of trouble was not a sound. It was a torrent of small noises on the interphone that tripped over each other. Chimes, a half-finished word from the aft galley, the purser asking someone to repeat a seat number, a man's voice speaking too fast and then cutting off. Sato and I looked at each other the way crews do when the room tilts a degree. He hit the switch. Flight deck. "Hana here," she said, breath close to the mic. "We have a passenger in the aft cabin who collapsed in the aisle, profuse sweating before he went down. The doctor on board is checking, but he is not responding." "Age?" Sato asked. "40s, maybe 50s, row 43. He was with a group. They said he had a fever since boarding." "Keep the area clear," Sato said. "Use the medkit. We will stand by." He covered the mic. "Your radios," he said to me, and stood. I watched him flip the door selector to unlocked and step into the galley with a quick word to the forward attendant. The door shut behind him. The cockpit felt wider and emptier in a way I never like. I listened to the frequencies and watched the engine numbers drift a hair with the air. Everything up front was quiet and predictable. I wanted it to stay that way. A minute passed. 2. The chime hit again, and this time the tone of it felt wrong. The forward attendant's voice trembled. "Captain to the aft, please. We need the captain." I keyed the interphone. "Status?" "He is. He just stood up," she said. "He was not breathing, and now—" He bit May on the hand. "She is bleeding. He will not stop. He is biting." Her sentence broke. Not the way polite speech breaks, but the way a person runs into a wall. I locked the cockpit door and said the words a pilot does not want to say. "Captain, return to the flight deck." I did not hear him. I heard yelling in the background and the hard crash of a service cart hitting something. The interphone carried a scream and then a roar of overlapping voices that made no sense. I switched the seatbelt sign on and pulled the interphone again. "Everyone stay seated," I said into the PA. "Cabin crew, secure the aisles and return to your stations." I forced the words steady. I kept them short. The airplane does not care about emotions, and sometimes you have to borrow that. A male voice cut into the cabin channel, tight and controlled in the first syllable and frayed in the last. "Federal Air Marshal, get back." Then a muffled report, flat and sharp. It did not echo in the way the movies do. It snapped and died, and in the pause after, people began to shout. "Captain, status," I said, because callbacks are anchors. No answer. I looked at the door camera. A narrow view showed the captain moving toward the cockpit from the forward galley with 2 attendants behind him. His left sleeve was rolled to the elbow. His right sleeve was wet from elbow to wrist. He stopped short of the door and turned back to the aisle. The picture jumped then, because someone slammed into the door from the other side. The panel shuddered under the hit. The captain stepped in, but not far. Someone grabbed him by the shoulder and pulled him back out of frame. I stared at the lock light and listened. The interphone was a mess of calls from row numbers, crying. The purser's voice trying to cut through with instructions that no one was obeying. She shouted for belts on, for people to sit, to get out of the aisle. A second flat pop came from aft and a woman cried out for a medic. I called the purser by name. "Hana, listen, are you there?" She came on, breath short. "We have 3 down. The man from 43. He bit May and Luis. The marshal shot him in the chest. He got back up. The marshal got bit in the arm. The marshal is... I do not know. The marshal is on the floor. People are stepping on him. I need you to tell them to sit down. Please. I am making an announcement, I said. I hit the PA and used a voice that tried to be bigger than me. Everyone sit down now. Belts on. Do not crowd the aisles. Cabin crew, secure carts across the aisles to form barriers. Use blankets. Use belts. Do not let anyone move forward. We are diverting to the nearest suitable field. Sit. Down. Now. I dialed for a frequency we use for long range when we need help and keyed the mic. I gave our call sign, position, altitude, and a short version of the problem. We have a security event in the cabin, multiple injuries, possible biohazard. Captain is not at the controls. I am the pilot flying. Request immediate vectors to nearest suitable diversion with long runway and emergency response. Prefer Alaska if within reach. The controller responded without drama. Expect Anchorage. Say souls on board and remaining fuel. 311 souls, I said, because counting each seat told me that earlier. Fuel on board is 93,000 pounds. I did the math in my head by habit for endurance and burn, and checked it against the page. I could reach Anchorage with reserves. I could even hold, but I did not want to. The door camera showed a blur and then resolve. The captain staggered back into the frame with a flight attendant hooked under one arm. She had a towel wrapped around her hand. Blood soaked through in a slow spread. He shouted something I could not hear through the door and pointed aft. She shook her head hard. He shoved her into the forward galley and turned back again, and a man lunged into the frame from the aisle with his head low and his arms pumping. His mouth was red. The captain punched him hard in the face once and then twice. The man did not step back. He hung onto the captain's arm and drove him into the bulkhead. The door shook under another hit. The reinforced frame groaned in a way I did not want to hear. I checked the lock again because checking it made me feel less useless. The indicator stared back, green and steady. I brought the thrust back a hair and started a gentle left turn on course for Anchorage. I told the controller I was descending 2,000 feet to get below a patch of light turbulence. I wanted the airplane smooth to keep the cabin from turning worse. Medical emergency, I repeated on the PA. We are diverting to Anchorage. Remain seated. Cabin crew, brace the forward area with carts now. Use belts and zip ties on hands of anyone who is violent. My mind threw a list at me. Halon extinguishers as impact tools, seat cushions as shields, pot of boiling water from the galley if they still had power back there, anything that kept distance between teeth and skin. Hana, I said on the interphone, how many attackers? 4, she said. Now 5. It spreads. I do not understand. People who were bitten stand up and attack. It is fast. Understood. Keep the front secure. Do not open the cockpit door for any reason. Not even for the captain. Understood? A beat. Understood, she said. I stared at the captain's empty seat next to me. His headset was crooked on the headrest. His water bottle rolled a little and stopped against the throttle track. I set the approach page for Anchorage. I built alt constraints and waypoints in a string so I would not have to think about them later. I pulled out the airport diagram, laid it where my hand would find it without looking, and read the ILS frequencies in my head the way a person recites a door code. The door thudded again, then again. A shout cut off at the end, as if a mouth had been covered hard. I lowered the cockpit temp a few degrees to keep sweat from blurring my grip. My hands were steady, but my breath wanted to climb into my throat. I pressed it down and looked outside at the smooth white sheet of cloud stretching to the horizon. There was no sign of trouble out there. It was all inside the tin can I was driving. The controller came back with vectors and weather. Anchorage was reporting scattered low clouds, good visibility, a direct crosswind I did not love but understood. Emergency crews were rolling. Approach would clear us direct. No delays. I asked for long final and no speed restrictions. He said granted, and told other traffic to make room. Those other voices yielded with a kind of silence I could feel, even though I could not see their faces. I made myself eat one protein bar because my head gets slow if I do not feed it. I chewed with my teeth clenched half shut because I did not want to open my mouth more than I had to. Ridiculous, but the brain does strange math under pressure. I washed it down and then set the PA again. This is the co-pilot. We are lined up for a fast descent into Anchorage. Stay seated with belts on. Do not approach the forward galley. If you are near a service cart, roll it into the aisle to block movement. If you can help the crew, do so under their direction. Do not engage anyone who is biting or attacking, unless you can do so safely and in a group. Use blankets, belts, and bags as shields. I did not say the word zombie, because that word does not fit in a cockpit. I felt it in the back of my head anyway. Static hissed, and then the purser again. We blocked the forward labs and galley with 2 carts, she said. We tied belts through the handrails. We have maybe 20 people packed into the galley and first rows. May's hand is wrapped. She is conscious but sick. Luis is not conscious. I cannot reach the marshal anymore. I think he is under people. There is a lot of blood in the aisle. Keep your people facing aft, I said. Do not let anyone move forward. We are 20 minutes out. I will make a hard break. Brace for it. A fist hit the cockpit door again. Not a single hit, but a rhythm, steady and patient. I kept my eyes on the display and pretended the sound was a mechanic tapping a panel. The camera showed nothing in the frame now. The lens had a smear of red at the bottom edge. I shut the feed off. There is only so long you can stare at a narrow window into chaos before it stops helping. I ran the descent checklist by myself, answered myself, set altimeters, tuned the ILS, briefed myself on the missed approach I did not want to fly. I strapped tighter into the seat and put my hands on the yoke for the first time since top of climb. The autopilot held, but I wanted to feel the control surfaces through the column when the air got bumpy over the cold layer. Anchorage approach took us and cleared us straight in. I could hear something in the controller's voice that told me we were not alone. He was working 3 other aircraft in trouble and a helicopter pilot who sounded rattled to the point of silence. The controller kept his rhythm. He cleared a runway and asked about medical staging. He kept saying the same phrase to each of us. You are priority. That meant no one was. I called the cabin again and told them to brace in 10 minutes. Hannah said the forward area was holding. The attackers had retreated a few rows and were pacing. I asked her to conserve strength. I asked about the captain. She paused. He is down, she said. He saved Akiko and May. He is not moving. Someone pulled him back by the legs. I cannot reach him. I said, copy, because there was nothing else to say. I knew what the word down meant on this airplane today. I added a belt of power to keep speed in the descent because I needed the time margin later. The airplane sang a steady tone in the background that meant we were clean and fast and pointed home. The door shook again. This time there were 2 hits, then 3, then a scrape. I pictured teeth on metal and told my head to shut up. I set flaps to 1 and felt the nose rise a hair. The world outside thickened from white to grey and then broke. The mountains opened under the nose, black, brown and ridged, with snow in the cracks like old scars. The bay lay hard and flat. The runway stretched clean and dark. I could see the wind on the water in rifts and I adjusted my mind to match. Anchorage Tower, emergency aircraft on final, approach said for me. Cleared to land, emergency vehicles standing by. Cleared to land, I said out loud to the empty seat because the ritual matters. Cabin, this is the flight deck, I said. Brace in 60 seconds. I armed the spoilers. I set flaps 20, gear down. The thump settled under my feet and the drag wrapped itself around the airplane in that steady, predictable way that means physics still loves you. I trimmed out the bite of the crosswind and put the nose a hair left to hold centerline. Flaps 30, speed set. The runway end lights lined up with the nose. The wind tried a small trick on short final, and I rolled out the aileron and kicked straight. Minimums. I was already committed. The mains kissed and then grabbed. I brought the reversers up and laid on the brakes. The cabin behind me roared in a scatter of cries and thuds as bodies leaned into restraints. The airplane slowed, straight as a rail, 60 knots, idle reverse, manual braking. We turned off at the high speed and stopped on the taxiway where the emergency trucks waited. I set the parking brake and said, "We are stopped." The engines idled. I took a breath that tasted of plastic and hot dust. I wanted to cut the engines immediately and evacuate, but the forward cabin was a trap and engines at idle are giant knives. I keyed the interphone. "Hannah, status for evacuation." "We cannot use the forward doors," she said. "The attackers are pressed against rows 1 to 3. We can use the overwing exits if you keep the engines at idle and the slides do not blow into the inlets." I scanned the positions in my head. On this airplane, the inlets sit forward and outboard. Overwing slides and exits can be used if the engines are fully spooled down. I decided fast. "Stand by. When you hear the engine shut down, open the overwing hatches. Use megaphones. Send the strong passengers first to help others down the slide. No one runs. No bags." I looked out the left window. Fire crews waited with foam and hands up, uncertain what we were bringing them. I mimed cutting engines and pointed aft. One crew chief gave me a thumbs up. I ran through the flow by touch because my eyes wanted to dart everywhere. Fuel levers to cut off. The engine stepped down from a low thunder to a steady wind, to a strange silence that was not silence at all. The packs whined, the fans spun down. I cut the beacons. I flipped the evacuation command 2 on and hit the PA. "Evacuate. Use the overwing exits only. Do not open forward doors. Crew, block forward. Go, go, go." The cabin message tone hit and the sound of the slides deploying came through the frame as a rubbery bang and a rush. I could hear voices now outside under the window. Firefighters were shouting orders. Another set of sirens approached fast. I looked at the cockpit window handles and thought about the rope. The cockpit window exit is fast but dirty, and I would leave the door unmanned. I did not want to open it to the forward galley in case the attackers were there with hands and teeth. I decided to wait 30 seconds for the overwing flow to start. I watched the door camera again. The smear of red was larger. The frame showed shoes, some moving, some not. Then a face slammed into the lens so close that the whole view went white-brown-red. Teeth scraped the plastic. The person pushed and gnawed and then slid away. "Hannah," I said. "Overwings are open," she said. "People are moving. We have 3 crew in front holding a line with carts. Someone is slamming the cockpit door. I think 2 attackers are down in the forward galley. The others are pushing through seatbacks. I need more time." "Understood," I said. I let 2 beats pass. "I am coming out the window." I pulled the pin on my harness, grabbed the escape rope canister, and unlocked the left sliding window. Cold air stabbed the back of my throat. I shoved the rope out, braced my feet, and slid. The metal of the fuselage scraped the side of my boot, and then I was on the ground, knees bent, roll absorbed, breath cut short. A firefighter grabbed my arm and tried to pull me away, but I shook my head and pointed at the overwing area. "Keep them away from the engines," I said out loud, even though the engines were already dark. Habit again. Passengers came down the slides in clumps. A teenage boy helped his grandmother to her feet and walked her across the paint lines. A man in a black jacket tried to go back for his bag, and 2 firefighters held him by the shoulders and told him no, in a way that had no second sentence. A woman in a blue scarf clutched her baby and shouted for her husband, who had been in the aft lav. A crew member pointed toward the tail, and the woman ran that way with the baby against her chest. The forward cabin door rattled. I looked up. Something hit it from the inside with a long, heavy blow. The window in the door crazed across. The hinges held. The firefighters looked at me. I shook my head and sliced my hand through the air. "Keep clear." 2 more bangs, and a third. 1 hinge bent a fraction. A police vehicle slid in under the wing with tires scrubbing. 2 officers got out with long guns held tight. Their faces were set, but their eyes were wide. One shouted at me, "Are you the captain?" "Co-pilot," I said. "Captain is inside, injured. Do not open the forward doors. All attackers are forward." He nodded once and flagged 2 more units to block the area around the nose. Their radios spit with too many calls at once. I heard the word terminal and the word barricade and someone asking for more tourniquets. The officer's jaw clenched. He put himself in front of the forward door and raised his rifle not at the window, but at the gap where the door would be if it blew. He knew what he was doing. I looked at the wings. People were walking out over them and dropping to the ground with low jumps. A crew member stood at the overwing hatch and counted. Good, numbers matter. I crossed to the wing route and shouted, "Keep moving, use the lines. Do not touch the slats. Keep your hands on the wing surface." I sounded like an instructor, and some part of my mind scolded me for tone, but people obeyed. A man came out of the overwing hatch with blood up to his elbow and a fixed stare. He moved along the line of people with a jerking, determined step. He reached for a young woman's shoulder. The young woman flinched away and slipped. The man lunged. 2 firefighters moved in at once and tackled him off the wing. He hit the tarmac hard. He twisted on the ground, tried to bite at air, tried to crawl back to the slide. An officer stepped in, pinned him with a knee and steel cuffs, and then wrapped a belt through his ankles. The officer was breathing fast through his mouth. He did not swear. He did not speak. He worked. Another woman came down the slide in a slow crawl, clutching the rope with both hands. A crew member at the top called to her by name. "Priya, eyes on me. You are doing fine." Priya slid, hit, winced, stood, and limped with one hand on her side. She had the blank, tight face of someone who had used up shock and moved into the place past it. Hannah came out last from the overwing hatch with a megaphone under her arm. Her face was grey around the mouth. She scanned the ground and then saw me. "Mara," she said. She stepped into me and then stepped back because we did not hug here. "Forward door," she said, pointing. 3 left inside. 1 is May. She changed. Do not let anyone open that. I nodded and said nothing right away because my mouth did not trust words. I made myself focus on steps. Account for as many as we could. Keep the forward section sealed. Hand the airplane to the ground. Leave. I ran the outside of the fuselage and tried to count heads as they moved across the paint. That is a fool's job once people scatter, but I did it anyway because it is the only way to give shape to chaos. We were short. We would always be short. A ground supervisor hustled up in a bright vest and asked me to confirm fuel cutoff. I showed him the levers with my hand. He nodded and relayed to a crew behind him that moved cones and foam carts into place. He pointed at the forward door as a question. I shook my head again, and he shifted resources aft without commentary. Professional. Then the forward door gave. The top hinge snapped with a clean metal cry. The door bowed out an inch and then more. The officer planted himself harder and shouted at his partner. The partner took the other side and braced with shoulder and hands. The door pressed against both of them with a pulse that had no rhythm, only force. A pale hand came through the crack, fingers clawing at air. The officer slammed the stock of his rifle down on the hand without hesitation. Bones gave under the strike and the hand withdrew. The officers looked at me for a call. I had none to give except the one I had already given. "Do not open," I said. "No matter who calls out, do not open." Someone inside the forward galley started screaming words that sounded like please and captain and help. The voice was wet. I did not go closer to the crack. I did not look through it. Some doors are for the living only. Sirens grew. More vehicles rolled up. A man in a white helmet with a red stripe stepped into the circle and took command in short sentences that made sense. Perimeter set. No forward access. Channel evac to aft buses. Medical prioritize bites and children. Law cover the forward door. Foam truck stand by for any fire. No one opens that door. He said his plan once. He did not repeat it. People moved. A girl in a pink coat tugged on my sleeve. She could not have been more than 8. "My mom is still inside," she said. "She went to help a lady with a baby." Her mouth shook, but her eyes were clear. I looked at the overwing flow. It was slowing. The stream became a drip. The aft cabin must have emptied or jammed. "Name," I said. "Lena," she said. "Lena, stay with Hannah," I said, and handed her to the purser, who put a hand on the girl's shoulder and squeezed once. I wanted to walk back up the wing and crawl inside and drag people out, but my job was finished here. The airplane was off. The door was sealed. The crew on the ground had control. Going back in without a full team would turn one problem into 2. The man in the white helmet came to me. "Are there firearms inside?" "One," I said. "Federal Air Marshal. He was bitten." The man nodded. "Understood." He spoke into his radio in clipped codes and then looked back at me. "We need your manifest and an estimate of who is missing." I tore a page from my dispatch packet with the passenger count and handed it to him. 311 total, 2 flight crew, 10 cabin crew. My voice stumbled once at the number 2 and then recovered. He took it and passed it to a person with a tablet who looked like all the screens in the world had stopped making sense. More buses arrived. The healthy and the wounded boarded in a slow, quiet line. No one argued about seats. No one shouted about time. The inside of the buses looked clean and safe in a way that made me uneasy, because the word safe had already moved under my feet today. On the far side of the field, a plume of smoke rose, where a small jet sat crooked on the grass with foam pooling under it. Crews were on it, and I could hear distant shouts through the wind. A helicopter came in low and wavered before settling behind a hangar. The world had moved into a different gear, and Anchorage was not the only place grinding. A man in a green jacket approached me with a phone held out. "Your ops wants you," he said. I took the phone and pressed it to my ear. The dispatcher's voice came through thin and fast. He asked about injuries, about the captain, about the cabin crew. He asked if the airplane had sustained damage. He asked if I could fill out an incident report when able. His voice had the tremor of someone holding a dam. "Later," I said. "We are still evacuating." He said, "Understood," and then whispered, as if his own room had ears, "It is everywhere. Europe, East Coast, several Asian hubs. Crews are reporting the same pattern. Fever, collapse, then aggression. Authorities are not in agreement on cause. Some airports are closing to inbound traffic. Others are taking anyone who can make it. We have 4 more flights en route to Anchorage now. No one is sure what to do with people after they leave the plane." The line clicked dead. The man in the green jacket took his phone back. He looked at my face and then looked away. I heard a heavy thud from the forward door and then a quiet that felt wrong. The officers took a step back without meaning to. The door did not move again. The quiet lasted too long. I thought of the captain behind that panel and thought of how he always said he liked boring skies. I put my hand on the metal skin of the fuselage and felt the cold through my palm. A paramedic waved me over. "You are pale," he said. "Sit for a minute." He handed me a bottle of water and a packet of glucose tabs. I did not want to sit. I wanted to go back to the flight deck and reset the breakers, clean the panels, put the airplane back where it lived. I took the water and drank and sat on the bumper of a truck because standing had stopped making sense to my knees. Hannah came to stand beside me. She had a tear in her uniform near the waist with a small dark line under it. She saw me see it and shook her head once. "Clipped by a tray edge," she said. "No bite." She said it calm and flat, so my brain would hear it in full and stop spiraling. I nodded. "May?" I asked. Hannah stared at the tarmac. "She went quiet," she said. Then she stood. I blocked her with a cart. She pushed me and went for the door. The others pulled her down. I do not want to think about what happened after that. We did not speak for a while. The wind off the bay licked at the foam spread on the concrete. A plane taxied by on the far side, with a long string of emergency vehicles trailing it like a bright tail. The tower made a call that cut into the field speakers. Stop movements on 2 runways. Confine all arrivals to 1. That meant too much traffic and not enough ground. The man in the white helmet came back. "We are taking the forward door off with tools and shields," he said. "We need to make sure no one is alive who can be saved. We have a team with shields, poles, and restraints. Keep everyone clear." I did not want them to open that door. Every part of my training told me to isolate and contain. The moral part told me to check. The door was not a boundary anymore. People were inside it. He read my face and nodded like he heard me anyway. "We will not risk our people without cause," he said. "We do this for the dead and for anyone still breathing." He moved with his team. Shields went up. A tool bit into hinges that had already suffered. The officers braced with poles. The door swung an inch and then 2 and then wide. The team held. The smell that came out hit the air in a wave that made the nearest firefighter gag behind his mask. The team did not step back. 3 figures rushed the gap. The team took them with shields, drove them to the tarmac, bound wrists and ankles, and pulled mesh hoods over their heads. The figures thrashed and rolled and snapped at nothing. None of them spoke. Behind them, 2 bodies lay still. One was May. One was Captain Sato. I knew it by the cut of his hair and the way his hand lay, still open, palm up, as if ready to give an instruction he would never finish. I took 1 step forward, and the man in the white helmet put a hand on my chest and held me there. He did not push. He simply said, "No," in a tone that means the same thing in every language. I stopped. He sent 2 medics to check pulses that did not exist. He marked the bodies with small tags. He signaled to his team. The door came off its frame entirely and was carried away. The forward cabin was a wreck of trays, torn seatbacks, and streaks that would take paint to fix, if paint were in the plan of the world tomorrow. I sat back down on the truck bumper and drank another inch of water. I did not close my eyes, because when you close your eyes in a place like this, the noise inside your head gets too loud. I kept them open and watched a bird circle over the far fence and then vanish. An airport manager came with a clipboard and a face trying to be professional through a situation that did not respect clipboards. "We will move you to the operations building," she said. "You will give statements there. We have counselors." She said the last word as if it was a tool we might still know how to use. I stood. My legs felt mechanical, which was fine. I am a machine when I need to be. I looked up at the cockpit windows. The escape rope hung loose and dirty, swaying in a light breeze. I pictured my hands on the yoke, the runway filling the frame, the captain's seat empty. I pictured a living room with a picture on a mantel somewhere. I pictured a house where a wife or a son or a husband would not get a call because phone lines clog on days like this. And even if a phone rang, what words would you use? We walked toward the bus. A passenger stepped out of line to speak to me. He was in his 20s, a shaved head, a rugby jacket. He said, "You saved us." I shook my head and said, "We landed. The ground saved you." He started to argue, and then stopped, because he understood. He got back in line. Inside the bus, the air was warm and smelled faintly of antiseptic. Someone had passed out a few blankets. An elderly man had one wrapped around his shoulders and stared out the window with a clear gaze. He saw me sit and gave a small nod that landed heavier than any thank you. We rolled past hangars and fuel farms. I watched ground crews move like chess pieces around other airplanes in distress. One crew had set up a corridor of cones from an aft door to a bus and shepherded passengers through it as if rain alone was the problem. People need shapes to walk through. Cones are shapes. It helped. At the operations building, we disembarked into a long room with rows of chairs. Police officers stood at the walls with faces that had run out of expressions. A man behind a table handed me a form and a pen. The form asked me to account for time, actions, injuries, and observations. The pen felt absurd in my hand, and the form felt too small. I wrote what I could in clean, short lines. Time of incident. Passenger collapse in row 43. Captain forward. Bites. Marshal down. Door secured. Diversion. Landing. Evacuation through overwings. Forward door sealed until cleared by fire. A woman with a badge that said Public Health asked me about symptoms, onset, and progression. She asked me if any passengers showed rash, discoloration, or unusual eye movement before collapse. She asked if the victim spoke after standing up. She asked if any decontamination took place. I answered and watched her eyes flick down her list and back up. She was trying to draw boxes around a thing that had already chewed through its first box. Hannah sat beside me. She stared at her hands, then at the ceiling, then at her hands again. "I cannot stop hearing the door," she said softly, "the sound of it when they hit it." I said, "Me too," and that was all. Phones in the room began to ring in ragged bursts. People spoke into them for a few seconds and then hung up fast. Some laughed, a short wrong sound. Some cried without tears. A screen on the far wall came alive with a local news feed. The anchor's tie was crooked. The caption bar had too many words, and none of them knew where to sit. Images cut in of hospitals with lines at doors, of crowds at grocery stores, of a street with cars stopped in a knot and doors open. The audio cut in and out. The anchor said the word outbreak, and then corrected to event, and then said nothing for a long second, while the camera stayed on his mouth. A police officer I recognized from the wing stepped in front of the room. "We are sheltering you in place for the next few hours," he said. "We need to identify exposure and track contacts. We will get you to hotels or a secure area after that. We will keep families together where possible." A man stood up and said his wife had diabetes and needed supplies from her bag. The officer walked with him to a side table and found a medic who pulled a kit and set up an injection right there. The small, practical act put a tiny wedge into the heavy air, and a little of the room's tension eased. Routine saves. A counselor came and sat across from me, a woman in her 40s, with a kind face that told me she had seen too many sirens in her life. She did not talk about feelings. She asked me what I did next. I said I wanted to call the captain's family, but I did not have the right to do that, and company protocol would. She nodded. She asked me if I had anyone to call. I said no one near. She said, "We will stay." I stood and walked to the window and watched the runway from the far distance. An aircraft flared and touched down hard with smoke off the tires. It rolled long and slow. Another followed too close and went around with an engine howl that raised small hairs on my arms. The tower voice on the outside speakers sounded calm and firm. The ground vehicles were everywhere. My hands smelled like jet fuel and rope fibers from the escape line. I rubbed them and the smell stayed. I took that as a good thing. I did not want the smell of the forward door in my skin. An officer came over. "We identified the air marshal," he said. "He did not make it." The last 3 words were soft. He added, "His weapon is secured." He glanced at my face and then at the floor. "I am sorry," I nodded. A nurse handed out small bottles of sanitizer and paper masks to the room. People put them on in a tired way. I did too. It felt late for that, but it gave my hands a task for 5 seconds, and 5 seconds is a bridge to the next 5. Someone switched the news feed to local emergency guidance. The message was simple. Stay home if you can. Lock doors. Avoid contact with anyone who shows sudden aggression. Wait for instructions. The last sentence did not sound firm. Hannah leaned her head back and stared at the ceiling again. "Did we do the right thing with the door?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "We kept it closed." She shut her eyes for 3 breaths and then opened them and sat up. "I am going to check on the passengers," she said. She stood and moved down the aisle between chairs, stopping to touch a shoulder here, a hand there, calling people by seat number when she remembered, which mattered to them. It always matters to be seen in a crowd. The airport manager returned with 2 men in suits, company reps. Their faces were composed in the way of people who practiced crisis in training rooms with tidy whiteboards. This was not a training room. They asked for a short debrief and an agreement to speak only through official channels. I nodded because I did not care about channels. I cared about the captain's family and the crew. I asked who would call his family. They said a chief pilot would. They said the right words. I wrote the chief pilot's name on the corner of my form anyway. The hours stretched. Dusk dropped hard over the bay, and the lights came up outside in open squares. The rumor mill ran hot and then cold. Someone said the terminal had an incident. Someone said a roadblock had gone up on the highway out of the airport. Someone said the base at Elmendorf had sealed its gates. No one with authority confirmed any of it on a microphone. A teenager with a skateboard asked me if flying would stop forever now. I said no. I said airplanes keep going because people do. He looked at me like he wanted that to be true and sat back down and hugged his board. Close to midnight, a man in a city jacket came in and told us the next steps. We would be moved to a cordoned-off hotel nearby. Security would remain on each floor. Food would be brought to rooms. Health checks would be performed in the morning. He said, "This is temporary," and I watched the room hear the word and nod, as if it could hold weight. On the bus again, I sat by a window and looked back at the field one last time. Our airplane sat dark on the ramp under the harsh wash of floodlights. The forward door was gone, and a curtain hung across the gap. I saw a small group of airport workers standing in a knot near the nose, heads low together, smoking despite the signs. One of them laughed once, a small bark, and then covered his mouth with his hand. In the hotel room, the bed looked wrong, too soft and too clean for a day like this. I sat on the edge with my shoes still on and stared at the line where the wall met the carpet. The silence had a sound to it, a steady hum from the air system and the elevator cable singing somewhere down the hall. I put my head in my hands, not to cry, just to hold it still for a second. I called my mother in Minnesota and got her voicemail. I left a message that said I was safe and in Anchorage and would call in the morning. I almost said the captain's name and then did not. I lay back without undressing and stared at the ceiling and walked through the flight from door closed to shutdown in my head in the clean lines of a debrief. I wrote down errors and successes on a hotel notepad. I wrote down the phrase, "Do not touch the forward door" 3 times and then tossed the pen. I closed my eyes and opened them again because sleep would not come yet and maybe should not. Down on the street, a siren passed, and then another. A voice rose briefly and then died. The hallway outside my door had the startled quiet of a place full of people trying not to be heard. I stood and opened the heavy curtains and looked out. Anchorage at night is clean lines of light against the black. The airport sat low and sprawling, a net of white and amber. The mountains were a darker black above that, with a thin band of stars stitched over them. An airplane on final slid down toward the runway with landing lights steady and unhurried. It looked normal. It looked like any night I had ever flown. I put my hand flat on the glass until it cooled my skin. I said out loud to the empty room, "We landed," because it was something fixed and true. Then I turned from the window, locked the door chain, and sat in the chair with my back to the wall, and watched the door until the room's quiet smoothed into the kind of sleep that is not rest so much as shutdown. I woke after an hour to a knock that was not a knock, a scrape of card on metal. I sat up, moved to the peephole, and looked. Hannah stood in the hall with a cup of coffee and eyes that had not closed. I opened the door, and she handed me the cup, and we did not talk for a while. We sat on the floor with our backs to opposite walls and drank. "Dispatch is asking if you can ferry an aircraft tomorrow," she said finally. "Crew shortages, sick calls. They are moving airplanes to bases where they can secure them." I stared at the coffee. "If the runway is open, I can fly," I said. My voice sounded normal. She nodded. "I will go if you go." We sat until the coffee went cold. A soft light leaked around the curtain edge. The city was still there. The airport still hummed. Phones still rang somewhere for someone. Morning would come with more forms and new routes and words from people who needed to believe today would behave. Maybe it would not. I knew this. I would strap in again, brief a departure, and take a machine into clean air, because that was my line. We lost good people behind a door I did not open. We saved many in rows who listened when told to sit and breathe and wait. The numbers hurt. The numbers still meant something. I closed my eyes a moment and saw the runway again. The center line bright, the nose steady, the wheels whispering up, the world deciding for a second to give way under skill instead of chance. I clung to that picture, not as comfort, as instruction. Do the next thing. Keep the door you must keep. Open the one you can open. Land the airplane. And that's where we'll stop for now. Thanks for listening till the end. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me how the story hit you. What moments worked, what didn't, and what you'd want to hear next. And a big thank you to everyone supporting the channel, especially with extra membership. Carlos Herrera, Luca Mod, Jadala, The Great Anywho, Madam Midnight. You keep this project alive. Until next time, Survivor. Jack's Nightmares signing off.